Okay. I apologize. I missed some of the Division of Land Management's presentation, but I was curious about what's going on with the land acquisition, the freeze, and the requested audit. And the second part of that is, what about personnel for the Division of Land Management? I know, Pat, you're an interim director, but your duties are split. And I was very sorry to hear about the loss of Eleonora, but she was the area manager. So I don't know how those are going to be dealt with going forward.
Those are great questions. Some of those answers we're still trying to figure out. I guess from a perspective that, we're in this cost containment and we know we need to have a level of employees in the future less than what we are now. The business committee asks that we do research to see if Division of Land Management and Environmental actually made sense of pulling them together under one division director. So, and also they asked us to look at housing. Does housing work with the Division of Land Management also? So Butch and I were tasked, we put together a mixed group of people from Development Division, from the Division of Land Management, from Environmental and Housing Authority, Housing Department, or Housing Area, excuse me, using old words, and just to come up with those recommendations. And we recommend that we think it does work. It certainly will be able to save money, but also there's enough functional alignment that we think we will let these teams kind of go to work and try to come up with more efficiencies and effectiveness. So right now I do have a good management team that supports what I do, and I think that's probably why the business committee had asked me to do that, because it's not me, it's my whole team. We work as a team. And I've been really blessed with good managers that work with me, and I work with them, and that's helped. Nicole, it's just been a blessing over at Division of Land Management. She's also an area manager, so she's taken up a lot of the slack and really has been really patient with me around some of my crazy ideas. So I appreciate that. And then certainly Land Commission has been really, their responsibilities give land office a lot of oversight. And, so with Pat being there for years and years, and also Amelia, I think, I really appreciate the guidance that they give me, as well as, they shake me up every now and then too. I got it coming. So the other thing, to answer Eleanor's question, we'll probably address that as we look at going to the next step of pulling these three divisions together to see what might be the best way to handle that. Oh, the audits. So the audits, at first, audits always seem very scary to people. Whoa, why am I being audited and stuff? So I had Donna come down to explain why we do audits, and it's really, she talked to about, it's really an opportunity for us to be better than what we are. It doesn't mean there's any criminal activities. It's that maybe we just have things we need to begin to plug around reducing our liability. Maybe we should be doing something different. It's really taking an outside look at your organization processes and procedures and coming up with better ways of doing business. So I think the team has really been able to kind of accept that, and then allow that to happen. And I'm not going to say the team's not frustrated how long it's taking, but again, it's a huge audit too. So I think we also realize that it's a huge audit, and we just think it's going to give us some really good opportunities to be better than what we were. And a little frustrated how much time, because we're in this moratorium, but one of the things that the business committee had said, if there's something that makes sense that we need to move on, bring it up to them and they'll look at it. And if they think it makes sense, so they work with the Land Commission and the BC, and they make those decisions, and then they tell us go ahead and negotiate that purchase. So with all those things, we're trying to do the best that we can during this time. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add, or if I said something incorrectly, please correct me. So,
Leah?
Hi. At the March 26, 2014 BC meeting, the current treasurer mentioned that we're actually going into fiscal year 15 with a $30 million shortfall. And given that, my concern is, while that sounds good that you're working together fine, I'm a little concerned that if we don't fill these other positions, if we don't keep the environmental department separate from the land department, we would lose some of the objectivity between the departments, and possibly a lot of healthy objection between the different viewpoints of having those functions separated, and especially if now they're considering and combining and consolidating the housing authority with the land office and so forth. So I think that's one thing that we should really take into consideration as well. And also in terms of the actual tribal cemetery, I'm not so sure that tiling is going to work. If anyone's been out there in the last couple days or the last week, there's a giant pond right next door separated from a dirt road, and from the dirt road to it, there's actual trickling water coming down. And needless to say, there's also standing water in different areas of the cemetery as well. I think it's more important at this point, even given the shortfall, that we don't look at trying to cut costs now to find a temporary fix when, in fact, we could very well find out later this year that there's no way this tiling system could actually remedy the situation. So I really need to encourage the people to find a different site, find it as fast as you can, and proceed forward with finding the most humane and respectful ways of removing the loved ones who are still in the cemetery there to the new site. So that would be my consideration, and my hope that you take that into thought when you're providing your next fiscal year 15 budget.
Okay. You want me to answer those then?
Sure.
Okay. Great questions. Thank you. I'll do the cemetery one first. I think our backup plan is to find a secondary site. I think that's important. So we did ask to move that along and then we will be putting that, as they find a site, then we have to make sure we test that site to make sure we have a really good idea of where the groundwater is. We're going to be able to look at aerial photos to see what the surface water. The thing is, the surface water we know a lot about. The groundwater science is still a science out there is a lot of questions around it, because sometimes you may have one groundwater site that's maybe 100 feet away, all of a sudden it changes direction on you, or it may have arsenic in it or something like that. So that's why we got to do the due diligence when we look at a new site. So we aren't going to wait until after this doesn't work. We are actually in the process of looking for a second site. So thank you. We'll definitely, we're doing that. The thing with the environmental health and safety and the checks and balances, that was one of our original recommendations that we made, I think 2 years ago already, Patty, where we said it was important to have the checks and balances within the organization. It's not unlike what the DNR does. They have the people who actually do the work, and then they have another group of people that actually do the inspection and the regulatory stuff. And what they do is they do a separation through those management levels. So that's some of our plans, is that we want to create an area within environmental health and safety that's more of a regulatory branch. So that's our thoughts behind that. So Jeff Mears is actually going to be tasked with doing that, working with the group to make sure that if we do bring all these divisions together, once we finish all the transition and approvals, that there's going to be a checks and balance even within the division to make sure that they'll operate under that regulatory area. So it's not unlike what you see from chief of staffs of any state. Or I'm not saying I'm a chief of staff. Please don't think that, because I'm not. But it's just that's kind of how we'll have that model in place. As that, we got to do everything for what's best for the community in GTC. Part of that is making sure that there's a group within environmental health and safety that they remain objective. That's what they have to do. They have to be able to present the pros and cons on a particular incident, and so the decision makers can make the very best decision. And it's based on the science that we do. And then the other service areas around project restorations and stuff, that's certainly based on science too, but we also have a responsibility to the needs and wants and the desires of the community. So that's why we have it separate from the regulatory end of it, but there's also a cultural component too. And when we wrote our water quality standards, we wrote it based on science and stuff, but part of it is also the cultural importance we put into those water quality stances, as long as with morphology, the shape of a particular stream. So no other water quality standards are like that. So hopefully I answered your question. around the cemetery, a lot more work to come on that, and we appreciate your feedback on that too. So, and then I definitely would share those, and you probably already have with the decision makers around that cemetery too. So with the trust committee and the enrollments office. So, but thank you. We will plan for that. So I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, prior to picking this particular spot where the cemetery is right now, we did have another spot that was available. Now, whether that is still available, I don't know. But I think they're going to go back and take a look at that first one that we did recommend before this one. So we'll go back and do all the tests and, see if it's going to fit, see if it's going to be okay. And I hope so. So it's not that anybody's just walking away from this. It's got to be fixed, and it will be fixed. And I understand, for our tribal members. But as far as all the different departments, I think you really get successful in doing the things for the tribe when we all work together for the same goal of our community. You got to have that togetherness, no matter what department you work in. And I find that's where you have your most success, when you work together. That's, I don't know if that's an answer you're looking for, but that's how I feel. I've been on the Land Commission for 20 years. Not after July, it won't be. But, the tribe has come a long way. And I just can't say enough how far the tribe came from a long time ago. And 20 years is a long time ago when we only had maybe about 2,500 acres, to the services, to the homes, to everything that we've done, for our community, environmental, all these things. I think the tribe has done a great job.
Again,
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leah, you had two questions already. We have somebody waiting.
This was a follow-up statement.
You did, but you used two questions, Leah, so please, we have somebody waiting.
Part of the ground rules. My one other
Leah,
comment was that I'd
please,
like to
please be respectful.
encourage. I'd
Please.
like you to be respectful to me, Brenda.
Yes, the ground rules. You took two questions. Please allow
No
this
ground
elder
rules
to
such as two
come up to the
questions.
thing and ask her question.
This is my follow-up question. I'd like to make sure that the Environmental Resource Board is consulted with the cemetery ongoing. I had spoken with a past member who said that when the cemetery issue was coming up beforehand, they were never consulted. So I would like to make sure that, yes, continue that cross-regulatory relationship, but again, to caution that consolidating all of these departments under one head may not be in the best interest of the tribe as a whole, to retain the objectivity and a healthy objection when needed.
Thank you so much for your patience, Julie.
Okay, I'm fine. I'm here for the duration. Can you hear? Okay.
There you go.
Thank you all for. I was so glad to hear the 2020 plan is on target, or not maybe exactly, but at least within the constraints that we are under, and you're doing everything possible because that's who we are. We've got to get that land back, and we've all got to have that philosophy, because if we don't, sometimes it comes up at GTC about, well, why are we spending $10 million when that allocation was made to buy land? It's who we are, and we're getting it back. So thank you for that. My questions, well, I can only do one, so I'll ask I think the most critical one right now. But it's all to do with the dollars allocated in the budget, whether or not you have the resources, dollars, and the staff to do what you need to do. And I think, it's a we. It's not you. It's we. We have a toxic dump out there behind the casino, and it's been there for 30-some years, and we all know how it is, and we all went through the trauma of trying to remedy that, and I think some of you were here then. We did the legal issues, and then we did the emotional thing on the gasification plant. Very, very emotional, very, very upsetting to so many people, and yet we've got the worst possible toxic dump that was a potential for a Superfund at one time. And the politics out there determined no, it wasn't, because the Koch brothers who bought it now, and you all know who they are going to remedy that, and they have remedied it. Well, has anyone found out if they have have they, I don't know what the process is to remove the toxins first and then put the residue out at the dump. Do we know that yet? Or, has there been any kind of follow-up at all with that? And I know it's a political and legal issue a lot. It's very much stronger than we believe it. And it's, every time we go by there, my husband or I ask the question, is anybody going to do anything? And then we feel so weak about it because, we got the Koch brothers to fight there. If we do, we take on, we've got Koch brothers who donate, what was it, $17 million to Walker's campaign. So that's what we're fighting. And we've got even bigger politicians than that. And also other people who are supporting the, those political things that go on out there that sometimes everyone's working hard and trying to do what they have to do. So we don't always, when you're retired, you can watch CNN and MSNBC all day if you want, and you can get the details. And so it's very, very threatening to me by going by there. And what are we doing? It was okay for a while to believe that the toxins were removed, but we don't know that. And where are they being dumped? Then somebody said, well, maybe Wrightstown. Well, let's just leave it there because we've got a layer of protection, some kind of plastic underneath that's never going to seep into the groundwater. And yet there's still times when there are fumes that come in. Customers have complained about it, and other people that go by there. We don't know what the impact is. So I don't know if you have a response, or maybe that's more of a political thing that we need to hear from, but you're part of that. So I'd like to hear maybe your points of view, because you've got the experts and the technical staff to respond and assist the politicians and our legal staff to find out what are we going to do in the future. What is it? What does it mean to us? Thank you.
Wow, that's a great question. That's a question that we've been working on ever since I started 19 years ago, and well, it's 20, like Laura said, or somebody said, because I used to be on the Environmental Resource Board before joining the tribe, and that was the hot topic back then. And so there was a hands-off approach by EPA and DNR at one time. It was supposed to be a Superfund site. But what had happened, and maybe you remember just as well as I do on this, but they did come up with a remedy with that site, with that 50. So they do all the best technology they can, but then they also have a 50-foot retaining wall where they actually then pump the groundwater. And this is layman's term, so I'm so far removed from the science now that I've been a manager for 30 years. So, but we do have a team that looks at that. So that's the treatment, is that they have 50-foot retaining wall, and then they pump that to treat that groundwater. So one of the things that we do know that's about that site, it's under clay. Things don't move through clay. What happens a lot of times is a lot of these chemicals bind to it. So that's one thing that we got going good for us. But I'll tell you, we can make a difference out there, and we have. So when we were doing the Fox River cleanup issues, they were going to build a contaminated cell out there. So we actually hired experts to bring in to begin to fight that battle with the business committee and the law office. We look for the best of the area to do that. While we were doing that, the Environmental Resource Board was working on a grassroots initiative to actually stop that. Now, I don't know who was more effective. I have a tendency to think that Laura's group was more effective than our legal group and our science group, but they stopped that expansion of that landfill to be a hazardous waste landfill. So any contaminants that are going in there now, they're below that hazardous waste. Now, I'm not saying they're not contaminated things that still go in there. There are, but they're within the guidelines, acceptable limits of the regulatory agencies. So it's not considered hazardous material, but it is contaminated. So we have an agreement in place with the DNR that any new stuff, any new plan modifications, or any sharing of the well information as they come along, or if there's any dings in the well, say outside of their scope, because that's wells all over that place, making sure that that groundwater is not leaving there. And so they share that information with us anytime it's outside of that scope. So, we have a staff person that does review that when the DNR shares that. And they've been really good. We work very well with the regional office over the last 15 years. And so we do the best job that we can, knowing that that is a site that we really wish wasn't there. But based on the regulations and based on of the present situation of where that solution for that Superfund site, it's kind of what we have before us. So, but we will continue to work with the DNR and the EPA to make sure that they're following all the laws and regulations around new landfills. So I know that's about the best we can do now, but we're also looking at it as much as we can. But we do rely on the DNR to share any of that kind of information. So.
Just a short follow-up. Is there a plan for a phase-out? Because that was supposed to be within that remedy, and it was presented to the tribe as an appeasement measure, I suppose, at the time. But that was supposed to, remedy the situation for the time being, at least. And then the other question is, what's the difference between contaminants and what was the other word?
Hazardous waste.
Hazardous waste.
It's a level of concentration of the waste, and it's done by analysis of what parts per million is allowable on around human and health impacts, and they categorize them. So that's the only difference is the level of concentration levels. So like PCBs, anything 50 parts per million over, that's considered hazardous. Everything under is within the guidelines that can go in a general landfill as long as it's construction. And you are correct, there was a phase out at one time, but they did a plan modification based on changing the character of the waste. They converted it from sludge to fly ash. And what that meant is that landfill can be there longer because it concentrates the sludge still within acceptable, it's still in acceptable levels, but we did object to that. The tribe did object to that. We went through all the hearings and stuff, but they still went ahead and moved forward with that plan modification. So that landfill will be there for a while yet. It'll be there forever but hopefully eventually they'll fill that thing up and then they'll have to go somewhere else. So, and as you know, over the years, the paper mills, they've been able. Paper mills was like the golden goose around the Fox River Valley. It was like they always said the Fox River was a working river and things of that nature. But really, the Oneida tribe led that effort for on the PCBs cleanup and stuff. Certainly, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we let them think they led that effort with the DNR, but I think the tribes really led that effort with Menominee and us. We said, when did Fox River ever sign up to be a working river? We feel pretty good about the level of cleanups that's happening in the Fox River down in Butamore. This is all related to that, discussion. So hopefully I'm not getting too far off. But that environment is rebounding faster than what we thought. They will be able to eat the fish in the Butamore area like 10 years before than what we thought with reduced fish advisories. So, so technology, was hoping that that's going to be some of the future solutions to this. So there's a smart guy out there trying to figure out how you eat PCBs because they have such a long life. But there'll be somebody that figures that out. And then hopefully once we find that out, we can then work with James River. That's who runs the James River operating landfill. Even though it's part of the Georgia Pacific and Fort Howard, it's kind of weird how that's all set up. So anyways, I'm getting way off track. But so hopefully, we'll look at that and challenge those in the future too. So
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. I think Pat Cornelius has something too.
I just have a little response to some of the, very quick. I'm concerned about the Highway 54 dump and trash that's hauled in there on a daily basis. I'm concerned about that place as well as what you're talking about. And I'm also concerned about the cap dump on Fish Creek Road, that we monitor them because we got homes all in them areas, that's near the groundwater, near the creek. And this one here, too, is on 54. I'm concerned. My grandchildren will come up someday, and we have to decide what we're going to do with that for our children. So that's just my thought, and I know we have that on the radar, just to keep that in mind, that those need to be taken care of.
Thank you.